Welcome to Compelling Topics, the only channel dedicated to the perspective of leading researchers from the Italian independent scene. Let's turn your minds on. In the early hours of December 11, 2006, in the quiet northern Italian town of Erba, an event occurred that would stun Italy and raise questions about evidence, interrogation practices, narrative construction, and judicial certainty. In a small apartment on Via Armando Diaz, four people were brutally killed. 30-year-old Raffaella Castagna, her 2-year-old son Youssef Marzouk, Raffaella's mother, Paola Galli, and a neighbor, Valeria Cherubini. The couple's home was found set on fire, smoke visible in the stairwell. Alongside the bodies, police found signs of extreme violence, deep stab wounds, and slashed throats. But miraculously, one victim survived. 82-year-old Mario Frigerio, husband of Valeria. Frigirio's survival would prove crucial, but also deeply controversial. Although his throat had been cut, he did not bleed to death due to a rare congenital carotid artery malformation. He was found alive but unconscious and later became the main eyewitness in the case. Within weeks, investigators arrested 2 neighbors who lived in the same building. Olindo Romano and Rosa Bazzi, a married couple. They had argued with some of the victims in the past. Public attention quickly focused on them. Soon after their arrest, Romano and Bazzi confessed to the murders, but later retracted those confessions, claiming they were made under intense psychological pressure. Their confessions were a cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Yet from the start, parts of the official version raised questions. The surviving witness, Frigerio, first described a man different in appearance from Olindo Romano. Only later, after repeated questioning, did his testimony change. There was no significant blood trail outside the apartment, despite the prosecution's assertion that the killers would have left covered in blood if they had exited on foot. A highly publicized bloodstain on Olindo's car pedal, initially presented as evidence, was later shown to be questionable in origin and led to an investigation into how it was collected. Some forensic evidence was challenged for its reliability and chain of custody. Despite these concerns, Romano and Bazzi were convicted at every judicial level: trial court, appellate court, and ultimately the Court of Cassation, Italy's highest court, and sentenced to life imprisonment. Still, the case continued to divide legal commentators, forensic analysts, and public opinion. From the outset, one of the most disputed elements of the Erba case was the confessions, according to defense observers. Romano and Bazzi were interrogated for many hours, repeatedly, with different officers asking the same questions. They were told that without a confession, there was no case. With it, their sentences might be reduced. Such methods, common in lengthy interrogations, can produce false confessions, especially from emotionally fragile suspects. Critics of the interrogation process pointed out that some statements attributed to the couple were logically or physically impossible. Certain parts of the narrative, such as the rapid spread of fire started with an ordinary lighter and blanket, did not align with fire dynamics as understood in forensic science. In other high-profile cases, in the United States too, long interrogations and inducements to confess have been shown to produce unreliable admissions, later overturned on appeal or exoneration. Following their arrest, Romano and Bazzi were tried in 2008 and convicted of 4 counts of murder, arson, and various related crimes, receiving life sentences. Their convictions were upheld on appeal. In 2025, a renewed request to reopen the case, based on arguments about procedural flaws and evidence issues, was denied by the Court of Appeal in Brescia. The court confirmed that the convictions remain lawful and supported by the entirety of the evidence presented. Yet debate continues in Italy's legal community about the rigor of the investigation, the reliability of key testimony, and whether all alternatives were adequately explored. A significant point of controversy in the Erba case involves Mario Friggerio's testimony. At first, he described a man not resembling Romano. Later, investigators introduced Olindo's name during questioning, and the description shifted. Defense lawyers and legal analysts have argued this shift illustrates how suggestive questioning can reshape witness memory under duress. Additionally, the absence of expected blood outside the crime scene and the questionable nature of key forensic traces have been raised as problematic aspects of the official narrative. The Erba massacre received massive media coverage in Italy. Newspapers, television, and talk shows framed it as a tragic but clear instance of domestic violence escalated into massacre. Yet critics have suggested that media amplification, especially early certainty about guilt, may have influenced public perception and even aspects of prosecutorial strategy. This is not unique to Italy. In the United States, too, media narratives have sometimes outpaced judicial facts, leading to long-term controversies in cases such as the West Memphis 3 or the Central Park 5, where later analysis found serious doubts about evidence and confessions. Today, the Erba massacre remains a legal and cultural landmark in Italy. It raises questions about confession reliability and interrogation practices. It highlights the interplay between forensic evidence and narrative framing. It shows how public perception and media amplification can shape the story around a crime long before all facts are established. It is into this complex, contested, and deeply human landscape that Paolo Franceschetti opens his perspective in this video, offering critical viewpoints that challenge mainstream interpretation and invite deeper scrutiny of what justice, truth, and certainty really mean in a case like this. Now they're reopening the Erba case. In the past, they reopened other trials as well. For example, the Via D'Amelio massacre concerning Paolo Borsellino. That case was reopened through a review process, and all the people who had been sent to prison were released because it was proven that the witnesses had been false. So people were framed. They weren't exactly saints. They were mafiosi, but they had not committed what they were accused of. That's one case, but there are many others. Important retrials have taken place. Perhaps they simply don't receive the proper media attention. I realized this when I was preparing the review petition in the Beasts of Satan case. Judicial reviews are very rare. When I went to file the review petition, the court clerk, a woman, told me, "Another review? Incredible. We're receiving many requests for reviews in different cases." That meant it was a historical moment when a kind of wave, let's call it an energetic wave, of reviews was beginning. So I understood that important reviews would follow. Not in every case, of course. In some cases, like the Beasts of Satan, it will probably take longer. It may even come after the main protagonists of that story are dead, but it will come. It's inevitable. Regarding Erba, it is so evident that a special unit acted that even at a time when there was no wave of reviews, immediately after the first instance verdict, Roberta Bruzzoni, a criminologist who usually supports establishment positions and official versions, said publicly that this had to have been a special commando unit that disappeared. She even hypothesized across the rooftops. Why? Because there wasn't a drop of blood outside the apartment. Olindo and Rosa, according to the prosecution, should have exited that apartment covered in blood after such a massacre. They later claimed they had gone to a laundromat and washed their clothes. Impossible. You don't remove heavy blood saturation with a normal washing machine. And they would have left traces on stair railings, door handles, surfaces. Nothing. Not a drop. Instead, there was blood dripping toward the window, and then it stopped. The logical explanation is that a commando entered, acted inside the apartment, and exited through the window. The execution technique confirms it. The victims' throats were cut with professional precision. An amateur with a knife slashes randomly, shoulder, abdomen, wherever. Here, they were taken from behind and their throats cut cleanly. Mario Frigerio survived only because he had a carotid artery malformation that prevented massive bleeding. The attacker assumed he would die from that single cut and did not strike again. That shows certainty and training. At first, Frigerio described a tall man with olive complexion, not Olindo Romano. Only later, during the investigation, Olindo's name appeared in his testimony. People in traumatic shock are confused. Investigators tell them, there are killers out there. If you don't identify them, the case collapses. There was no real evidence against Olindo and Rosa. There was a bloodstain on the petal of Olindo's seed Rosa, later discovered to have been planted. The Carabinieri officer who found it was investigated for falsifying evidence. Sometimes investigators convince themselves they're framing a guilty person for a greater good. I don't believe in their good faith, but I do believe in Mario Frigerio's good faith. I've seen how trials work from the inside. They often unfold this way. Why would a special unit intervene? We cannot know. There are different levels of principles behind operations like this. The executors often don't know the ultimate purpose. One thing that is never done in these cases is to dig into the victims' families. If someone did, as could have been done in Cone or in the Monster of Florence case, motives might emerge. But that would lead upward, toward real responsibility. So instead, the victims are presented as ordinary people leading normal lives. Often that is not the whole picture. They may be unknown to the public, but they are not always uninvolved in complex dynamics where sometimes the price is this. Yes, there is also a ritual dimension, one the executors may not even realize. When symbolism is present at a crime scene, you must consider an esoteric dimension alongside the material one. Of course, you cannot bring esoteric evidence into a courtroom, but it can help understand patterns. Look at the symbolism. Rosa Bazzi was originally reported as Angela Bazzi, then changed to Rosa. Rosa Romano, Rosa R. the Red Rose. The seat, Rosa. The town of Erba, grass, evoking the field where roses grow. Nearby Alba Villa, white dawn, recalling the golden dawn. Layers of symbolism appear repeatedly. About coerced confessions, absolutely. Interrogations last dozens of hours. The same questions repeated by different officers. You are told, you're finished. Sign, and we'll reduce your sentence. That is the turning point. Notice something. In these atrocious crimes, the culprits are almost always socially marginal, poorly educated, fragile individuals. The beasts of Satan youths could barely articulate themselves. The supposed Monster of Florence mastermind, same pattern. Olindo and Rosa, same. It is never a high-ranking doctor, lawyer, politician. Why? Because powerful people have protection. Fragile individuals are easy to manipulate. In the Beasts of Satan case, some confessed falsely. Their confessions contradicted each other and contained impossibilities. Yet the system pretended to believe them. Rosa claimed she set fire to the apartment with a lighter and a blanket. To burn an entire apartment like that, you need accelerants, gasoline, or similar. You cannot carbonize a house with a lighter and a blanket. As for these special units, they use specialized techniques to avoid detection. They are not merely rogue intelligence services, though they may be supported by them. They are special operational bodies not officially acknowledged. Think of Gladio. For years its existence was unknown. Yet many massacres were signed Phalange Armata, including Capaci. That was a coded signature. Gladio's full structure is still not fully known today. Across Italy, there are agencies, more than one per city, composed of individuals specialized in killing and illegal operations in service not of the official state, but of deviant factions within it. The Prime Minister does not officially order these operations, but certain intelligence sectors or influential figures can commission actions. On my website, Pedale di Lodo, there is an old article titled, How to Kill a Man Without Leaving a Trace. It was based on a book distributed to politicians who needed rapid instruction about intelligence operations, including methods of undetectable killing. There was even an entry on Saka Gakkai, describing how infiltrations could monitor people's habits. In the 1970s, this required human infiltration. Today, technology does the job. Remote access to phones and computers reveals everything. The methods evolve, but such methods exist, and someone must know and apply them. That is what these agencies are for. The Erba case, at least on paper, is over. The verdicts have been issued, the life sentences confirmed, the appeals exhausted. For the Italian judicial system, the file is closed, the responsibility assigned, the story concluded within the boundaries of the law. But cases like this do not simply fade away because a courtroom has spoken. They continue to exist in the margins, in the small details that refuse to settle. They linger in interrogations that stretched on for hours, in statements that shifted over time, in forensic traces still discussed years later. They survive in the quiet discomfort of questions that never received answers clear enough to silence every doubt. Whether one is convinced that Olindo, Romano, and Rosa Bazzi are guilty beyond any reasonable doubt, or whether one believes that unresolved inconsistencies still cast shadows over the official reconstruction, the Erba massacre ultimately confronts us with something larger than a single criminal event. It asks us to reflect on the mechanisms of justice itself. How reliable are confessions obtained after prolonged psychological pressure? How stable is human memory when shaped by trauma, suggestion, or time? What happens when public opinion, fueled by intense media coverage, solidifies before judicial processes are complete? And how often do complex investigations, faced with chaos and uncertainty, gravitate toward the most coherent narrative rather than the most exhaustive one? Thank you for being with us. See you soon on Compelling Topics.